Hi, my name is Katie, and for this project, I studied the co-occurrence of cannabis use disorder and schizophrenia. This is a very important co-occurrence to study because while schizophrenia only affects 0.3% of the population to 0.7%, um, half of those with a schizophrenic diagnosis struggle with a co-occurring substance use disorder, and one of the most popular substances that they may use is cannabis. So, having a better understanding of the relationship between cannabis use disorder and schizophrenia can help provide better treatment and just a better understanding in general of what these individuals are going through. So, my paper is going to seek to answer three research questions. These questions are: how do genetic variabilities and family dynamics contribute to the development of the co occurrence of cannabis use disorder and schizophrenia? Next is, how might policy and societal changes on cannabis use affect the prevalence of co-occurring cannabis use disorder and schizophrenia in at-risk individuals? And lastly, what effective treatment options are available for the co-occurrence of cannabis use disorder and schizophrenia, and how might stigma affect treatment? So my paper is divided into three themes, and the themes that I'll be exploring are etiology, policy, and treatment. So my first theme is etiology, and this is definitely a debated subject on this topic. Many believe that the two disorders have a causal relationship. Mostly people believe that cannabis use can cause schizophrenia. Through my research, I did not find any substantial evidence of a causal relationship between the two. However, I did find that there are similarities in genetic liability for both cannabis use disorder and schizophrenia, indicating that the relationship is not necessarily causal, but that if somebody is genetically at risk for developing schizophrenia, they are also genetically at risk for cannabis use disorder. Furthermore, someone may have the genetic build for schizophrenia, but that can lay dormant, and depending on frequency and dosage factors, cannabis use can potentially trigger that. So it's not necessarily causing it, but it can trigger dormant schizophrenia. All of my research consistently found that frequency of use and dosage were important factors in triggering and developing schizophrenia. Furthermore, the studies that I found did make reference to environmental factors and social factors, indicating that stress is a risk for both disorders. However, there is not a lot of research done on environmental and social factors. Most of the research is dedicated to biological causes to the disorders, which definitely shows gaps in research and indicates that there needs to be more of a biopsychosocial model used to determine the etiology of these disorders. The next topic that I researched was policy. So this is a very important topic in the discussion of cannabis use. America has legalized cannabis in many states, but most of the studies that I found were based out of Canada, because Canada had officially made it legal throughout all of Canada as of 2018. So they have more better long-term idea of the repercussions. So what I found was that as more states or provinces legalized marijuana, there were more new cases of the co-occurrence of cannabis use disorder and schizophrenia, showing that policy and legalization can greatly impact the development of these disorders. Furthermore, a big issue, especially, well, everywhere, but definitely in America, is this new synthetic marijuana. Manufacturers are able to kind of manipulate this product and many of them have very high potency, as high as a 20% THC potency, which, as I discussed in the etiology, this can have serious effects for developing schizophrenia or cannabis use disorder. And as the textbook mentions, policymakers are not able to make laws and regulations as quick as these companies are able to make more products or different strands. So that's definitely an issue in our society right now, and something that has potential to have preventative effects, but there is definitely a need for more research and more regulation to have a better idea of what actually needs to be regulated. So the final topic that I researched was treatment. So as I've been discussing before, this co-occurrence is not well researched, and so there's very limited treatment options for the co-occurrence of these two disorders. In most settings, they are treated separately, which is very unfortunate because literally half of the people with schizophrenia are not able to get the correct treatment that they need, which is very sad. However, most of what is found in the treatment is that atypical antipsychotics are the best for treating the two. This antipsychotic can block dopamine and serotonin. However, our textbook does discuss that clozapine, which is the most popular one to treat and the most effective, can cause deadly suppression of white blood cells, which leaves people very vulnerable to infection, and is one of the reasons why mortality rates are very high for individuals with schizophrenia, or one of the reasons why. Furthermore, some therapeutic mechanisms have also been helpful. Most popular ones are motivational interviewing, and cognitive behavioral therapy, and contingency management. These are best used in conjunction with an antipsychotic, an atypical antipsychotic. But there's definitely a need for further research and treatment. I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from this entire process, was that if half of the individuals with schizophrenia are struggling with a substance use disorder, most popularly cannabis use, why aren't there more treatment programs that target the two disorders together? I think that conducting more research on this topic could make substantial impacts in the treatment and change lives for those that are struggling with these disorders. So in conclusion, while cannabis use disorder is so common among individuals with schizophrenia, there is a major lack of research on the relationship between these two disorders. There is a desperate need for more research on why these disorders appear together so often, and also how to treat them well, and finding treatment methods that aren't harmful to the individual. Furthermore, another issue that is getting more and more common and more needed is policy makers to enact policy changes that protect people. This could be a really good way of prevention. Just putting restrictions on who is able to get it and how much potency is in the THC could possibly make the substance less addicting, and also have a lesser effect on the brain. But overall, informed prevention and treatment is definitely needed, along with beneficial policy implementation and extensive quality research. Thank you.